Welcome to the Sage Family Podcast, where we explore natural homeschooling, gentle parenting, simple living, and family adventure.
I'm Rachel Rainbolt, the Sage Family Mentor, coming to you from an island in the Pacific Northwest, where I live wild and free in connection with my hilarious husband and 3 growing sailors in our fixer-upper on the beach. So join us around the campfire and let's get living the family life of our dreams. This is episode 98, and today I'm here with Sizer and Maren Goerss talking about the journey from homeschooling to school. Hosts of the Homeschool Unrefined Podcast and authors of the new book, Think Differently About Learning, I'm so excited to have this great conversation with both Angela and Maren today on the podcast. Something that continues to support our family as we evolve through different seasons and educational labels is the bucket system. If your family could use some soft structure for collaborating around daily routines that hold space for seasonal intentions, self-care, home care, personal growth, then tap into the bucket system at sagefamily.com/bucket-system. Will you each introduce yourselves and share a bit about who you are and what you're passionate about?
Sure. My name's Angela and Angela Sizer, and I live in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And I homeschooled my kids for 10 years, and now they're in school. And that's kind of a recent change. And Maren and I have this podcast, Homeschool Unrefined, that we've been doing for, I don't know, well, since 2016.
Yeah.
And we now wrote a book. So that's what's kind of keeping me busy is the podcast and the book and all of that. So it's exciting.
And I'm Maren, and I also live in the Twin Cities near Angela. And I used to be a teacher. I taught elementary school for a long time and then also homeschooled my kids for a really long time. And while I was homeschooling, I really kind of did a deep dive in neurodivergence and how kids learn. And so now I am actually doing parenting and ADHD coaching for families and for adults as well. And I'm just loving it because I get to help people, kind of see their superpowers and have better relationships with each other. And it's just a really wonderful way to keep thinking about learning all the time. And I just love that. So yeah.
Excellent work. Okay, how did you each come to homeschooling? I assume, I don't assume, I know you guys were not homeschooled, so this was not on the agenda to begin with. So how did you come to it?
Yeah, it wasn't on the agenda, and I write in the book. I had some stereotypes of homeschoolers before I homeschooled. I was a teacher too, and I just wholeheartedly was all in on public education and the traditional ways of doing things. And you all know how that story goes. Then I had my own kids, and it started with my 5-year-old, and just her not really fitting into school, basically, like it not being a good fit for her, and us having to explore different options. And I'm laughing because I told my husband, of course, like, I'm just like reading about homeschooling. We're not gonna do it. I'm just like informing myself about what other people do.
Slippery slope.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it was a slippery slope. So she went to part-time kindergarten, and then we homeschooled after that.
Yeah.
And then then I was all in.
You were hooked.
Then I was hooked. And I just, I think what drew me was when my kids were younger, like really, and she was 5, and then I had 2 others who were younger. And I just saw their need to play. I mean, that was the driving force. I just was like, they need to play. This is the most important thing they could be doing. Why would I, send them to school and then they come home exhausted, and, when are they going to play? So I just really wanted to prioritize the play, and I felt like that was, I felt like academically she was going to be fine. Like we just really needed to focus on playing. And so that's how it started with me. And then led into more as they got older.
It's such a familiar story of like,
Yeah.
we have, this expectation, sort of like we have like the heteronormative expectation. There's just a default that we assume our children are heterosexual, right? So there's this like educational, like
normative
default.
thing. Yes.
Yes, the school normative, like, path that you just sort of birth along with your children that you assume. And then we meet our children and then try to fit, the square pegs into the round holes and then start to dive into researching what other options are available. I have a really clear memory of one time when I was talking to another mom about my struggles because my firstborn, I tried to put her in school and then learned very quickly that was not going to work. It was not a good fit for her. And some other mom was like, well, have you thought about like homeschooling? And I was like, I'm not interested in wearing a bonnet.
Yeah.
That was your image, the bonnet.
That was I believe in science, so that's not my culture.
Not an option.
Yes. And then I ate my words. Maren, how about you?
I mean, very similar things, except that, I would just add, I just remember thinking when my oldest was, it was time to start thinking about schools, I was just like thinking, she's going to miss out on so much of connecting with her siblings all day, and they're having so much fun every day. We have great days together, and it was just really hard for me to think about like separating kind of her from the rest of what we were doing as a family, because it was all so good.
Totally.
Yeah.
School wasn't better than what we were doing. I thought maybe a few, I don't know, at that age, in the younger years, I was like, maybe a few art projects. I don't know. It wasn't worth it to me to do that. And also I'm really glad, like, I think I had this inkling too about some neurodivergence that was going on with our whole family. And I didn't necessarily have names for that at the time. And I'm glad I just kind of like listened to my gut on that, because my kids really didn't feel like they were, like wrong or being bad or not able to meet standards or, not smart enough or something, because they're brilliant kids. Like very brilliant, but like probably wouldn't have felt like that way necessarily at school, because of just like fitting into into a, square peg. So it wouldn't have necessarily been the right fit. So I am just so thankful for it. Although even when we did start, and I write about this in the book, and talk about this on our podcast all the time too, about how even when we started homeschooling, I had to unlearn so many of the ways that kids learn, and the best way to even just nourish their heart and soul and, our connections and things like that. Because even the first day of, like official homeschooling, I was like pulling my hair out, like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I can't get my kids at the table. And so I was like, this is not going well. Either I need to change or I need to send my kids to school. And so I worked really hard on that for a long time to really let go of those expectations, because I needed to put, kind of my money where my mouth was, kind of a little bit, where it's like, well, I believe that kids are learning when they're playing. So now I need to act like I believe that my kids are learning when they're playing.
Yes. And then you'll feel it afterwards. Like, so a lot of people wait, like they're like, oh, the feeling needs to come first. Like I need to feel like this is learning. And then like I can like do the behaviors, that are in alignment with that. No, like you got to put the cart before the horse.
It's hard because there's no proof that you're on the right path or doing the right thing until later, with all of homeschooling, there's no like sense that you're doing the right thing. I mean, you can get little clues, but you still or I did, I'll speak for myself, had the fear that I was royally screwing them up, you worry about that because they're not adults yet. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, and it's hard to trust yourself.
This like education norm. I think this is such a good analogy. This education normative, like I don't know how you said it, but like, like thinking that, well, I'm doing something so different, and there is no necessarily proof out there, like, no, there's not a school saying this is the right way to do it. There's no system necessarily saying this is the right way to do it. It's just like what we kind of know, what we see happening right now.
Yeah, there are those two realities of like we see the outcomes from school and we know that they're not great in so many ways.
Yeah.
And yet, if your kid goes through that system and things don't turn out well, like that's the school. Like they sort of had responsibility for that, right? Like whereas if we take responsibility for doing something that is off the mainstream path, like and it doesn't work out well, like it feels like it's all on us. And that like fear butted up against like, hey, the way that we've been doing things for like the first, 5 years, like has been lovely and they have learned so much and they have been thriving and we have been able to like create this incredible context around their neurodivergence in which they are a strength, they are a value add, like they are happy and healthy and like surely that can't be wrong. Like we need to just keep moving in that direction and the learning will happen.
Yes. So true.
Yeah. Okay. One of my favorite chapters in the book is called Seeing Children as Humans because it lays an important foundation for the tragically radical stance that children are, in fact, whole people.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Can you speak to what that value looks like in homeschooling? How does it show up for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we just feel like it underlies everything. It's foundational. Underlies everything that we talk about. And it seems silly that you have to like devote a whole chapter to talking about it. But also we felt it was really important to devote a whole chapter to talk about it because there are so many just norms in our society where children are not treated as humans at all. Even though if you ask anybody, they would say that children are humans. Yes, they're so valuable, but we don't treat them that way always. And so we just felt it was really important to lay that foundation early in the book and devote a whole chapter to it and how it shows up like in families and culture and schools. So
right. And I think it's really easy as adults. It's a power structure, adults have a lot more power than kids. And so it's easy for us to say, well, their brains aren't developed yet. And which is true. Their brains aren't completely developed. They can't always make, the best decisions or whatever. Valid. So true. And they're still human. They're still fully human. They still deserve to have choices and eventually they are going to have fully developed brains too. They are going to reach this part and there's so much about just like their personhood, just like feeling like a human being at age, let's say 5 or 8 or 12, that carries through them to adulthood too.
Yeah.
They don't unlearn how they were, necessarily treated and how they felt while they were learning and growing up. That stays with you, right? And so it's all part of learning. It's all part of learning. It's just how you feel, how you connect to the world. Can I feel valuable? Can I contribute to this world? Do people appreciate me when I'm here? All of these things are so important to feel and understand when you're young, so you know how to even maneuver in the world as an adult.
Yes, so much. Yes. Like I've done an episode. So we embraced really like a self-directed, kind of unschooly model. And so I've talked a lot about that. But one of the things that like I haven't really talked about that was coming to mind while you were talking is that for a lot of parents, they have this like A plus B equals C, really future oriented model in how they parent or homeschool their kids. And sure, like the future, it's good to sometimes zoom out and have that broader perspective, but the present is enough. Like it matters enough to make the decisions worthwhile and the choices worthwhile. Like my child's sense of fulfillment and meaning in their pursuits today, they may have incredible future outputs or not, and it's still worthwhile. Like today matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the truth is, like, we should trust them, not because they are trustworthy. Like, they
Yeah.
know themselves, and that the information they give us about themselves and the things that they need and desire and whatever, that is very valuable and important. And, I think it needs to be respected in a way that we do not respect their whole process. And so I just think kids know what they need,
Mm-hmm.
know what's good for them innately in
Yeah.
ways that we as parents don't. And yes, we have more
Right.
information, and yes, like, we need to keep them safe and, all of that. But I do think that their voice needs to be elevated in a way that you would elevate somebody who's 25 or 30 or 35 or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They know what they need.
Yeah. And, you know, it's so important to also, I think so much of what you guys said, but just like also, I think valuing our children for just being, for not necessarily getting through the day and getting their
Mhm.
work done or, accomplishing anything, just being
Yeah.
being themselves and who they are, is so powerful, is so, so powerful. And I think sometimes we create this narrative that like, well, if my kid thinks that they can just do nothing all day, then they're just going to keep doing nothing all day. I'm actually thinking that's the complete opposite. This is it may not make sense to somebody who's never experienced this necessarily. But, taking away expectations and just being present and being, grateful for the person as they are right now today is the way it's like this gateway into like really fulfilling this amazing, like finding out more about yourself and learning about yourself and like creating this life that is like the best for you, for each person. And that's what the world needs more than anything is
Yeah.
everybody showing up with, who they are.
Yes, it really
Yes.
touches on this to like sort of like really core belief where most adults have never had the experience of not being told what they have to do,
Mm.
like,
Absolutely.
Mhm.
and who they have to be.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And so they have these core beliefs that like humans are innately bad. They innately like
Yeah.
need to learn through fire. They innately
Mhm.
need to be told what to do, or they would do nothing. They would hurt people. They would, and so it's so amazing and wonderful like how deep this stuff goes to
Yeah.
like the core, to like the bottom of those roots. Like
Yeah.
when we're talking about homeschooling and people are
Yeah.
like, oh, it's like you put a chalkboard on your living room wall. Like, no.
No.
You've got to like go all the way down
Yeah.
inside your guts and
Yes.
like look at everything. And when we trust children, when we like radically accept and unconditionally love them and trust in their nature, they like that trust then goes the other way and we get a greater influence.
Yeah.
They invite us in for greater
Exactly.
collaboration. They trust us when we
Yeah.
trust them. And so ironically, like if we skew that power dynamic way up here and try to tell them who to be and what to do, and then like the door is closed, like that trust
Yeah.
isn't open,
Totally.
and we have less influence over them.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
yes.
influence is so much more powerful than mandated,
Yes.
learning.
Yes.
Yeah. For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, what are some tips you have for the nuts and bolts of homeschooling?
Well, we were talking about this, and
Mhm.
I don't know, our nuts and bolts might be different than what people might expect nuts and
Yeah.
bolts might be. So, um, you know, in our book, we have whole chapters about like, really, how do I do this? Like, really, what do I do for each subject, or
Mhm.
how do I schedule my days, or whatever. But I think like our nuts and bolts are things like connection, making sure that you connect with your child. That's probably, the most important thing you could do. Um,
And that's not
about
normally on a nuts and bolts
it's
list.
not really on
You
a
know?
nuts
It's
and
on
bolts list.
mine. It's number
Okay, yeah,
one on
good, good.
mine.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Because
Uh,
in a lot of times people will be like, okay, connection, great, but like, what about reading?
What about math? Or,
Connection is the number one. Because if you think about it, like if you're trying to impart the skills to your child or create the space for them to, develop the skills that are meaningful for them. No matter what path you take in life, connection is going to be a foundational piece of it.
Huge.
Like you want to be, anything that we want to do in this world, you want to be a farmer. Like, who are you growing that food for? Like, there's like connection to nature. There's connection to the people who are going to eat that food. Like, you want to be a mathematician. It's the same thing. Like, you're working in collaboration with other people. You're like connection is like the starting point for all of it.
And connection is kind of like, it feels when you feel safe, when you have this connection with the most important person in your life, which as a child is your parents, right? And so, you feel that connection, then it feels safer to go do something scary.
Yes.
And try something new, be in the world in a new, different way. And then you can come back and be, to your safety and even just feel secure no matter what, and so that's really key, in everything. So
absolutely.
Some other things we talked about that are in our nuts and bolts would be like free time, really making sure that there's open time every day for the child to do what they want to do. And in fact, that should be like a lot of your day. That should be a lot of your day. And then like to counteract that, we really believe in like short lessons. Like if there are lessons you need to do, like, it's really important that we work on long division or whatever, keep those short, like 10 minutes or less, keep them real short, because when you have short lessons, kids want to work hard in that time because they know it's short and it's much more effective than dragging things out. You can really like that 10 minutes can pack a lot of punch. And then we can get on to the things that are more important than long division or whatever you're working on for 10 minutes.
Right.
We also really believe in flexible routines. So like not a schedule, but a routine, like having a rhythm to your day and a routine, but also being like really flexible within that for when things come up or when you need to change plans or whatever. And that way there's no like getting behind because you didn't like miss anything in your schedule because you didn't have one.
Right. Routines are great because that's another way of like having kind of like, we like to call them like 10 poles of the day, where it feels like I don't have to be thinking all the time about what we're doing. We have a routine, which feels good. It's like a wave or something, I'm going with the wave. Right. And it's a kind of a natural routine. And, but you're right. Things get in the way, and it's good to, or something comes up. A lot of times, like a child often will be like, I have energy to do this. And, following that energy can be the most effective, learning you do all day sometimes. And sometimes, we do talk about how, like the parent is also a really important part of this homeschooling journey. And so like, if there is something that's really important to you as a parent, it's great to bring that in. Like, don't forget about yourself and who you are. And that, something that like, it would really bother me if we never did this thing. It's so important to bring that up. And so it's good to have like some maybe collaboration with your child too, where you're like, this is really important to me. This is really important to me. How can we, create a schedule where we all get kind of some of the things that we need?
Yeah. Yes. So my most popular class that I offer is the bucket system, which is all about all this stuff that you guys are talking about. So I love it. I'm 100% jazzed about it. Yeah. There's like, I'm all about like the collaboration and like you talked about it being a wave. I think of it like a current, like having like that routine. It sort of just like creates this current, like, so you can get in and out of like the current whenever you want, but it just makes it easier. You can just, the current just sort of moves you and your children through like the routine. And there's this real like proactive front loaded part that you sort of mentioned, Maren, about like when there's this real mental load that moms carry, especially homeschooling moms, like it's even greater, like there's more that we're balancing. So, like if we, in the bucket system, I recommend like once a season. So like what in that seasonal transition, you sit down and you make all the decisions about like, what's going to, like what supports can I bring in for a struggle my kid's having? What thing do I want to bring, or do we, like it's in collaboration, do we want to bring in to nurture like your interests? What are your interests right now? What new thing do you want to try? What do we want to let go of? Like we make all those choices, and then they're sort of like, okay, now they're all made. And now we just follow that routine. Yes, we can, get in and out of it, but having all that stuff front loaded. So it's not every day is like, am I doing the right thing? Should we change that? Like, no, the decisions are made for this season. And then like, if you have questions, you can jot them down and revisit it next season.
I love that.
I love that. That's similar to what we wrote about in the book. So yeah, I love it.
Yes.
Good job.
Yes. Okay. Talk to us about outsourcing. What does it mean? When can it be helpful? What might it look like? All the things. Because I do genuinely see this as an underutilized resource in homeschooling. And actually, right now, my son, while we are recording this, is working with like 30 minutes twice a week. He works with a tutor on OutSchool doing all about spelling for his dyslexia.
So great.
So you're outsourcing. Good job.
I am outsourcing while we talk about outsourcing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is something that like new homeschoolers don't really think about. They kind of think like, oh, I have to do all of it. I have to do everything. I have to teach 8 subjects or whatever. I have to know all about 8 subjects and teach them.
Or it doesn't count. Like there's this like dogma
doesn't-
component, like, or I'm not really homeschooling. Like,
Think-
no, you are. You are.
Yeah. So it is perfectly acceptable and great. I mean, it's not even just acceptable. What's the word? Like, it's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
Advantageous.
It's advantageous
Absolutely. Yeah.
to outsource anything that you want to outsource. And in fact, you could outsource all of it and still be a homeschooler, except for connection. Connection might be the one thing you couldn't outsource.
Right.
But like,
Well, it's good. It's good to even have connections to other people too. So you can
for
outsource
sure.
some of the
For
right?
sure.
Diversify. We'll diversify
Exactly.
connection.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And so like there's so many ways you can do this. I mean, so many ways. You could trade
Yeah.
with a friend. Well, my kid goes to your house and then your kid comes to my house, and so for just playing. Or you could, like maybe you hate to teach math and so you find a tutor to help your kid learn math. Maybe you are part of a co-op and your kid goes to this co-op once or twice a week and they learn a few different things there. I think I do agree with you. It is underutilized. I think there are some barriers, it's hard to find opportunities, but we have the internet now, and I think that has opened up like a whole new,
So huge. So huge.
a whole new plethora of things that you can, do on the internet too. And I just think also it's beneficial, like Maren was saying, to have connections to different people, different friends,
Yep.
different adults. This can be one of the ways that your kid, get some of those needs met that they might not be getting and that they're not getting because they're not in school,
Yeah. And I think we have to give our kids credit for some of the things they do that we sometimes don't even count as learning because, again, in a traditional learning sense, it's not part of the school day. So, like a team sport or a musical instrument or a choir, or a knitting club, or, there's just like a million things you could do, a Minecraft group that like we would not traditionally give credit as like part of the school day. So in our minds, it's not actually part of the homeschool day. And we get to decide what learning is. We get to decide, well, we don't really get to decide. It's all learning, and we can decide if we want to give it credit or not, in our own minds. So guess what? Just bing, there it is. It's learning. Okay. So, like you get to say that. And so when if our kids were ever taking like lessons of any sort, going to soccer in the evenings or something, that was included as part of like the learning of the day. So we did not pack a full day of other things because they were having soccer that night. And that would have been just like way too much stuff. So in that way, you can kind of like, you can also put museums on that list. They go to an Omni Theater show at the Science Museum. That's such great learning, and you outsource that. Or you go to lots of different things, events, you go to a baseball game. There's just so many great ways to to utilize opportunities in your own community and count it as learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. Like when my kid goes over to the neighbor's house and eats dinner over there and they're Indian and they're making all this amazing food that I
Yeah.
do not have the skill or experience or knowledge to make.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes.
Great experience.
Credit for
Absolutely.
all of it. If he's running around with island friends, just building things with scraps of wood they find, I'm like, hey, engineering, yes.
So
Yes,
right. And it is.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it is.
Credit
It
for
is.
all of it.
And it's also like if he were to take, let's just say, an engineering class in school or something, maybe they wouldn't be that interested in that class. Like,
Yeah.
who knows? But because they're running around with friends and like, initiating this on their own, wanting to learn about this on their own, they're learning so much from that. They're learning all the possible, like all the 100% is learning. Whereas if they were in a classroom, they might get they might retain, well, I don't know,
Kudos.
not even 5%.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
From that experience.
I agree. And I think I like that you called out that there are barriers to it. There are certainly barriers to outsourcing things, like financially, obviously, that's the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am paying for my son to do that outschool tutoring program.
Yep.
And so financially is one, but I would really invite all of the parents out there who are homeschooling, and anytime something starts to feel like, I'm not doing this with a joyful heart. Like this is feeling sticky or something isn't working.
Yeah.
Like there's that's like a pause button. Like nothing is worth like the disconnection that comes from forcing something that's not right now.
Yes.
And so like my son who's doing this all about spelling tutoring on Outschool, I did the all about reading the whole series with him and then the all about spelling. And then we got to this level that we're on and we opened the book and we started doing it and we did it for a few days and we both just looked at each other and my son was like, we're not enjoying doing this together. It's like, you're right. This is not feeling enjoyable for whatever reason in this season. Like it's not feeling enjoyable. He was like, is there someone else who would do it with me? Like I would still like to do it. Can I do it with like one of those teachers online where they're like really excited about it? And I was like, yeah, you can. So
that's so amazing. I think that's such a huge win. That number one, he called that out. It was like, I'm noticing this is not our usual vibe.
And he was right.
And you felt comfortable doing it and you didn't take it personally. So good job.
Absolutely. Win all around.
I'm going to take that, put it in my heart. Thank you.
Huge win.
Yes. Okay, yes. So outsourcing, like really research and investigate and look at all the options in your area because there might be things you're not aware of. Like for example, if a kid wants to learn an instrument, like you could go to your local public school and they could do band every day.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Music lessons are very expensive. Instruments are very expensive. If that's not within your reach, like there are some creative options. So like we just want to give you all permission that like you can still be a homeschooler and you can still outsource things.
Yeah, and a lot of places the public schools let you do a lot of classes, sometimes like half time even. So, and that's free. It's right there.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Mental health and wellness is central to everything. So I was grateful to see that included in your book. As a therapist, I help moms and teens and families who are struggling to kind of get to the other side. So I really witnessed the importance and the power of centering this work in our parenting and our homeschooling and our lives. Like this is my jam. So what has been your experience with this issue?
Well, I think for me, I'll just speak for me personally. Every decision we've made, and I didn't realize this till writing the book, but every decision we made about schooling, whether it was to homeschool or to join a co-op or to quit a co-op or to go to school or whatever, was really mental health related. And for a variety of reasons and for a variety of kids. And so I just feel like for me, it was really the central, it was one of the central reasons why we decided to homeschool. And then also one of the central reasons why my kids went to school 2 years ago. And for completely different like mental health reasons, needs. They had different needs. And I think that homeschooling provides the space and the time, and you have the energy to really focus on your mental health
Yeah.
and
And the
to
flexibility.
the flexibility,
Yeah.
just like
Yep.
everything.
Exactly.
It provides the space to focus on it in a way that you cannot do when you are so busy all day long and when you're in public school.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you can't do it, but I'm just saying it's much easier and because you're given the space and time to do it when you homeschool.
Yeah. Well, and you don't have control over all the variables in the
Exactly.
school like you do in your own life. And really,
Mhm.
this is like, I mean, from my, like, what's everything we do, like I've said a million times, like we're either stepping into connection or away from it. Like nothing is neutral. And so you just keep stepping into connection. And it's
Yeah.
the same thing with like health and well-being. Like
For sure.
either we're stepping away, something is adding to our health and well-being, or it's taking away from our health and well-being. And if you just
Ooh.
keep stepping like toward the things that are contributing to your health and well-being, that are enhancing your health and well-being, that are giving you the space to grow in your health and well-being, like you will end up in a good place. And this is not even like a parenting thing or a homeschooling thing. It's like a life thing,
Yeah.
right? Like,
like a life
adults
thing.
don't know how to do this.
Mhm.
And they
Yeah.
end up in these lives where they're miserable. Like,
Right.
and I don't want that for my kids, and I don't
Yeah,
want that for myself. Like, so I'm going to keep stepping into a better, like more authentic alignment with my health and well-being. And I want to help my kids do that too. And interestingly, like the moral of the story isn't even what you're doing.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
knowing how to engage in that, like
Mhm.
being conscious of that process, like being able to make those decisions, being aware that something is no, like maybe this was really enhancing to your health and well-being, and then it shifts and it's not. Like, are you aware of that? Are you noticing that? Are you making those changes? Like, we have a stigma around quitting. Like, well,
I
no,
know.
this has shifted. So now this is not in alignment, and I'm going to
Yeah.
step towards something else that I want
Right.
to try that might be a better
Right.
fit now.
Yeah, exactly. And the great thing about this is not to add more pressure, to parents who are homeschooling, who are like, oh, now I got to think about mental, I need to add this to our day. It's not actually adding anything to your day. It gives you kind of a little bit of freedom to be like, you know what? It almost doesn't matter what else you do. If you're
Yeah.
focusing on mental health, you will incorporate as much as what is good for all of you into your day.
Exactly.
And you will declutter everything that's not serving you in that way. And so it
Yes.
actually creates just a really nice flow into your day versus like trying to jam pack your day with, getting content in or any other expectations that you think. I love Angela always talks about how, if their siblings were fighting, when your kids were young, Angela, you'd be like, well, lessons are less important than like getting down to figuring this out together. And that was prioritized. The lesson does not have to happen. This like conversation is gold. This is the good stuff. It's lifelong learning. It's going to be so good to know this kind of stuff. I think that my kids have learned how to speak up for themselves, definitely because of homeschooling, because I listen. Just because I've listened to what they've told me and given me
Their
feedback.
voices
And
mattered.
then, yes, their voices matter. They expect their voices to matter now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when they don't, they're kind of like, huh,
Yes.
that's different. I'm so glad that they feel that way when they aren't feeling heard now.
Yeah. And for a lot of homeschoolers, like, well, not even homeschoolers, for everyone, like the pandemic really shook things up in this regard and created a big invitation to kind of recenter on this value and to sort out like what is it that that each individual needs.
Right.
and for us, like at a certain point, all the homeschooling programs were still legally barred from running. Like every informal thing, every formal thing, all of the hag school adventures we would do, all the groups we were a part of, the book clubs, everything was banned from happening. And yet all the schools were still open. Like all the schools were allowed to be open. So like right when my two big kids were launching into adolescence and needing social community more than ever, that was the only available place to get it. And so like coming out of COVID, when the schools started opening, was when my two bigger kids shifted into the school system, which made perfect sense.
Yeah. Similar. We have the similar stories.
We had the
here.
same thing too, actually. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you know, where we live too, it's just there's just so few even co-ops that hold the value that we really need to see in a co-op versus you know, we need an expansive view of the world and everything, and
diversity and like hold space for trans kids
environment. Welcoming environments.
And we were kind of at the point where we're like, there's no way we can be in any other type of co-op. And so you know, it was it really important that for us, and Angela, I know you talk about this a lot too, so please stop me if you want to add on to here, but like it was so important for us to, as homeschool parents, and because of the tenets that we hold as, you know, the reasons why we homeschool, we're like, it's important for us to, you know, value our children as humans, right? And for their voices to be heard and their mental health and all these things. And so, you know, when our kids were kind of like saying, I think we need to start thinking about school, we were like, well, if we kind of just like ignored those voices for, you know, these ideas that were coming from our kids, we wouldn't be holding the tenets of the things that we, you know, really thought were important in homeschooling. And so
we wouldn't be trusting them and respecting them.
Yeah.
Right. And like so the highest value.
I still feel like I mean, our kids are in school now. I still feel very much like a homeschool parent because nothing has changed in my philosophy and in what I believe and how our kids are learning and how they should have a voice in their learning. And it's never, you know, required. We say all the time, like, we can still homeschool whenever, if that's always an option, again, seasonally, like we're not going to make a decision day by day. There's openings where we can reevaluate and redecide. The first year that one of my kids went to school, we created an IEP for this child. And we also put in there that, like, because of some, you know, mental health and learning differences, that that would be home, they would be able to stay home like once a week. And I made sure it was like in the IEP so that they, you know, we're not going to keep talking about this all year. This is just what my kid needs right now. This is a huge transition. And it was really important that I spoke up for my child and my child spoke up for what they needed to. So
yeah, that's awesome.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And I know we're kind of rolling into the school topic of, or rolling out of mental health and into school, but it's like so related.
Connected.
So related. So I do feel like my kids needed to be in charge, and are in charge. They are in charge of their learning, journey, and definitely in collaboration with us, right? But their voice is the most important. And when they started expressing desire to go to school, actually at the same time, I was thinking the same thing. I mean, it was kind of the easiest. I didn't think it would be an easy decision. It was a very easy decision after the pandemic, not after, but mid-pandemic or whatever. After being stuck at home for so long and not having our regular activities and not being able to see people and all of that, it was sort of an obvious choice for us in that moment. Like, for my kids' mental health, they needed to be in community with people. And it wasn't about academics or like, high school classes, or, it
Yeah.
wasn't about any of that. It was about needing to be in community, getting out of the house, having some separation. They were teen, they're teens. And so they needed a little bit of separation from their parents, and that's normal. And so I wanted to honor that stage that they were in and what they were desiring.
Yeah, teenagers have they hit this developmental season where they need to expand their
Yeah.
circle beyond the family of origin. It's like a developmental imperative. And from an evolutionary perspective, it makes perfect sense, right? Because
Absolutely.
if their circle is still just people they're related to, then they can't reproduce successfully. There's an evolutionary component to that. When we look at tribal living and whatnot, when a person would reach adolescence, they would often be sent out to go discover other tribes, and that's because we need the genetic variability.
We do,
Evolutionarily, it makes perfect sense. So adolescents have this developmental imperative. So it's really normal that happens. And that tends to happen right when the homeschooling community really thins out.
Yeah.
Which
it's true.
So I think it's a lot of homeschooling families sort of see that transition. And I have 3 kids. My oldest went straight into Running Start at 15, which is the community college program here.
Oh, you can do that young. That's awesome.
Well, it's for junior and senior year of high school, and the
okay.
state pays for all of it. And then at the end of the 2 years, they have an associate degree and a high school diploma,
that's awesome.
which is rad. So she went straight into that. Right at the same time that my middle started, he went to high school, he went to 9th grade. So they both kind of went together. They were in different programs, but they kind of went together, which was cool. Right. Sort of after all that COVID isolation, it was definitely the right choice for them. And my youngest still happily homeschools, though there is definitely a developmental shift that happens in adolescence where they need more social community beyond family. So right now, he's great and I am aware that I'm flexible in. I think part of the challenge for a lot of families is that it touches on this identity piece. You mentioned, Maren, that you guys are still homeschoolers. We are still homeschoolers or unschoolers. My teenagers still kind of identify as unschoolers. My middle, who's in the high school, had a teacher, the thing that annoys him the most is that they tell him he can't go to the bathroom. And one time his teacher told him he couldn't pee and he was like, no, I'm going to go to the bathroom. He has full autonomy. I'm if you just tell them to call me if they have a problem with you having bodily autonomy. I'm absolutely good with that. Our values of all of that are still very much embodied by my children. And they have this sense that they are tapping into this resource as it serves them. And if it doesn't serve them, then there are lots of other options and the choices are theirs. So from my perspective, that is best case scenario.
Well, right. Because, so most of the kids who are in school or their friends or whatever, they are there because they have to be.
Yeah.
And somebody's making them or whatever, and no judgment or whatever. I get it. It's the way it is. But so it feels like a drag, and they've been doing this for their whole life. They're just I'm gonna go to social studies class again or whatever. Whereas I think my kids have a different perspective. They know that they don't have to do this. They could change. They could go back to homeschool. They could take some college classes. They could do online school. they know that I will support them and work with them in whatever it is that they need.
Yes.
And so it doesn't feel like a drag. They're kind of excited. They're excited about some of their classes, in a way that their peers are not.
Yeah, being there by choice makes a massive difference. And my middle son, who started with 9th grade, he's now finishing up 10th grade and he's done. He's looking forward to going to the community college for the Running Start program in the fall. But he's it was really fun, experiment. It was really fun to get my High School Musical moment. I got to, climb up that social ladder and play the role of the prom king and do all of that fun stuff, and that that was a really fun experiment. And it's fully his choice, and he recognizes every day that it's his choice to be there, and that for me is what matters. He knows that he is supported in making that decision of what is in alignment with my health and well-being in this season, and that can always change and we can always pivot.
Right. And honestly, our kids just aren't burned out from from doing this since age 5,
Yeah.
They just have new energy from it a little bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, like I will have a lot of parents who will come to me with that fear of like, what do I do if my kid says they want to go to school? And for a lot of younger kids, I will invite the parents to really get curious about what is the need that the child thinks that school will meet and try to meet that need in other ways. Just because for a lot of, especially younger kids, like if a kid really wanted to go to school, we would support that. But they don't really know what that means. Like they just see on TV shows, like all their cartoon characters go to school. So for some kids, it's like, I really want a lunchbox, and the parents like, oh my God, that's why you want to go to school. Okay.
Yes,
we
or
can
the
get you
school
a
bus.
lunchbox.
Well, my youngest wanted to go on the school bus for so much. This just went past our house every single morning. It was so tough. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. So like figuring out like, what is that need, but also like having, like, it can be helpful to empower kids if they really want to explore this, to give them the ability to explore all the options that are available to them. So like, for example, my youngest, who's 12 right now, next week has 3 days in a row, like trial days at a local, like Montessori junior high on a farm with chickens in the woods. And
3 days in a row? That's awesome.
It's like a trial thing for him to see if he likes it. And it may not be a fit at all, like given the learning differences and all of that. And that's totally fine. But it's more just about like, I want him to know how to engage in that process of exploring your options. Like you can walk as far down this path until you hit a point where you're like, no, I don't think this is the right fit for me. And that exploration is worthwhile. Like it's worth knowing what your options are.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's so great.
So great. And again, you're empowering your child to see, that there are choices and it's good to know yourself. Like, like we talked about too, in homeschooling, you learn so much about yourself. You get so in tune with yourself that once you go visit this one place and you're like, I can kind of tell if this is going to work out or not a little bit more than normal.
Yes. Yeah, because they know themselves so well and they're fully empowered in being able to advocate for what they need and all of that. So any other wisdom to impart around that journey from homeschooling to schooling? I think a lot of parents too are afraid their kids won't be able to. Like if we choose to homeschool, they can never go to the public school. And I just want to say like the public school like legally has to take your kid. Like that's not even on the table as an option.
Right.
Like your kid will be fine.
Do you think people think that their kid maybe not up to par with like knowing all the right math things or reading? And I would say to that, I mean, I don't know everybody, I don't know everybody listening, but I think our kids are doing much better than you think they are. They are much more capable than you think they are. And they're doing less in school than you think they are doing.
Oh my gosh.
They are doing similar things in math every year.
Yeah.
Every year. And so
a lot.
And so it's not like they're, a full year of second grade, a full year of third grade, a full year of fourth grade. Like my kid never did that. And so now what am I going to do? They're 6 years behind or whatever. It's not like that.
No, not at all.
Not at all. So I mean, all of my kids did great going into the public school. And in fact, like they're ahead in a lot of areas. There was some catching up in a couple areas, but it was fine. It evened itself out in a short time.
Yes, I would say the same thing. Some of my kids, our kids were like way ahead in a lot of ways and maybe behind in some ways, but only because, that happens when you transfer schools too. Like it just depends on what schedule everybody's doing things in. And so you never know. And I always think too, our kids learn when they're developmentally ready to learn anyway. So if they're developmentally ready to learn whatever's happening in that class, they'll pick it up. And if they aren't ready, they weren't going to anyway.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Like for my oldest, like we really, like she had the goal of doing that Running Start program. And so we kind of reverse engineered, like, okay, what skills would you need to have to feel confident going into that experience? And then like scaffolded up to that for a couple of years going into that experience. And so like if you sort of have like a loose plan and then like you can always like make changes and whatnot. But my point being like we were largely unschoolers up to that point. So like there was not much scaffolding required. Like, can you read a book? Like, cool. can you write an essay? And oh my God, if you actually look at work samples from kids in school, like the bar is low. The bar is low.
The bar is low.
Low.
It's so
Can
low.
you read and write? And that's really all that's required. Even in the Running Start program where they get to start college, there's not even a math requirement. Like they at the most, if your child has never seen a number before, you might have to pay for like one extra math class that Running Start doesn't pay for, like, which is fine. Oh my God.
Totally.
Like I could trade 12 years of, classroom math learning for one community college class. Yeah. So like your kids will be fine is my point. If they want to be there, like, and you're supportive of them and providing whatever they need to make that happen, then they can do whatever they want.
Every teacher that I've talked to about my kids too has said, your child knows who to ask, and will always ask for help. Always ask for help when they need help. I mean, and so and that's just because that's their habit. That's what they've been doing their whole lives, is asking for help if they need help, or, asking for clarification or support in some ways. And so I just think like that's amazing. They
know
can
how
do
to
it.
learn.
And, they know how to learn. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes. All right. The show notes can be found at sagefamily.com/podcast98, where you can also subscribe and get future show notes sent right to your inbox. What are your favorite resources for people to dive deeper into this topic, Angela and Maren?
Okay. Well, we brainstormed a few resources, and we have kind of a lot.
Go for it. I'm ready. Lay it on me.
You've probably heard about all these or read all these too. But our book, Think Differently About Learning, has all this stuff that we talked about. And kind of like you said, Rachel, I wanted to comment. You said a few times, like, this isn't really just about homeschooling. This is just about life. And that's kind of how I feel. I feel like our book is. I feel like, I know people might think, well, it's about homeschooling, so I shouldn't read it. But I do think it's about parenting. It's about it's about you. It's just like most of it is applicable to anybody. So,
and there's a quote from me in it.
There's a quote from you in it.
So if you like listening to me talk on this podcast, you will probably enjoy their book, friends.
Yes, it is. It's in chapter 17. Yep. Okay.
Exactly.
And then our other favorite books are Untigering by Iris Chen. Love that one.
She's great.
Raising Free People by Akila Richards.
I've had all these people on my podcast. They're awesome. Most excellent.
Right. So, you in this one too. So, The Self-Directed Child.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Had them on twice.
All right. Awesome. Free to Learn.
Yep. Peter Gray.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
He's been on.
We like Julie Bogart, of course. Everything
she's been on twice. This is the podcast, Sage Family Podcast Archive, and I'm here for it.
So great.
Just listen to the Sage Family Podcast Archive.
Yeah.
Have you had Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson?
I have not.
Oh, okay.
You finally hit one.
Yeah.
Their books are great. Maren especially loves their books.
Yeah, they're not specifically homeschool, but they're definitely like, brain, science. And so it's like, I like that because it's less about like values or like subjective things. It's really just like, this is how brains work.
Yes.
So reality, you know, that's what I like about them.
A couple other podcasts we like are Joyful Courage. I don't know if you've listened to Joyful Courage, but
I've never
if you
heard
have
of that
teens, well, if you have teens, she's really good with like teen stuff. Tilt Parenting,
of course, Debbie Reaver.
Yep. And then have you listened to Upbringing Co?
No.
They are really great. They're like, if you have younger kids,
great for younger kids.
Really great. Parent, we're all in. You would love them.
Yeah.
They have younger kids and they talk about younger kid stuff. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you for those resources. I will link to all of them in the show notes. And there are 2 new things for me to look into in that list too. So thank you for that. And thank you, ladies, for joining me today. I feel like this conversation is such a long time coming. We've both been like in the same circle for so long. And it's so great to be like virtually face to face.
Thanks, Rachel, for having us.
Thank you so much for all you do too. We love that there are people who, speak up about these things because it's so important. And so we need more people like you. So thank you.
Yeah. And a special thank you to you too for being like really one of the only other people in this space advocating for inclusivity in all of these homeschooling conversations and homeschooling spaces. So like the number of people talking about that are few and far between. And sometimes it feels like I'm the only person standing there yelling into a room, like a cavern. But so thank you.
Thank you.
When you two started talking about that, I was like, oh my God, allies. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
All right, everyone go read their book. You're going to love it. And thanks for listening.